and additional video for Facebook, YouTube, and IGTV. For broadcast possibilities and to get your podcast started, contact us 879-4319. 879-4319. Be heard on Radio St. George, Radio Dixie, and a podcast studio. Just a few of the great things happening at Dixie State University.
Welcome to the podcast. We Do Recover with Jared Miller, your host.
And I'm Dr. Terry Sellers, your co-host.
This is a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, about recovery.
We want to talk about what successful recovery can look like.
Brought to you by Steps Recovery Centers.
All right. Good morning. Welcome to episode 003 of We Do Recover. We have a special guest today for you guys. We have the founder of Addict to Athlete. Coach Blue is in the house. Yeah, buddy. We're excited to hear from him and get to his journey of recovery. Before that, though, let's do some new and goods. Dr. Sellers.
Well, first of all, who's the guy that takes his shirt off in movies all the time that says, all right, all right, all right? Who is that? That's who you sounded like.
McConaughey.
Yeah, Matthew McConaughey. Thanks. That's who you sounded like to me this morning. Hey, that guy's Matthew McConaughey. Just keep your shirt on, would you?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's new? I'm down in St. George. I love it. I'm happy. It's a great day. I've known of Blue for a long time and have not met him yet. So I'm excited to talk to him today. His organization really has helped a lot of people, and I know a ton of people involved in his organization. So I'm excited to get to that. Blue, what do you got today? What's going on in your world?
Man, just got my run in. I'm doing good. I tell you, it's hot down here, you guys. It's like 15 degrees hotter than it is up where I'm at.
Absolutely. Hey, my new and good is I spent the last 2 days moving in this heat.
Oh, man.
And yesterday I get a call from my cousin. He's like, hey, dude, you want to go boating? And I'm like, do I ever? Yeah. Are you kidding me? Heck yeah.
The dry lake.
So, yeah, it was so nice to get in that cold water after 2 days of moving in the scorching heat.
Nice. Yeah, that's nice.
Sean, what's going on?
Well, I'm not supposed to say it, but last night we made a decision to go to Sturgis. So we're leaving on Wednesday morning to go to Sturgis.
Exactly why is that top secret, Sean?
I don't know. There's something about interstate travel or coughing on doorknobs or something. No. I don't know.
He meant Sturgis, Utah.
Oh, yeah, Sturgis. They have a great Maverick there.
Yes, exactly.
It's fantastic.
I don't think those rules apply on motorbike, though, do they?
Yeah, exactly.
2 wheels, yeah.
No, I mean, well, I think it's the 300,000 people there that might be a problem. But
yeah, but the wind in your face on the motorcycle blows all the COVID away.
Yeah, there we go. That's right. That's right.
It'll be fine.
Absolutely. Yep. Sounds good. Thank you guys for coming. I'm so excited about this. So, Coach Blue.
Hey.
Man, the founder of Addict to Athlete. You guys' slogan is erase and replace.
Yeah.
I love that. It's awesome. So tell us a little bit about what does recovery look like today for you? Like, take us into that. Let's get into the story of you.
Recovery today is really kind of jam packed with service. It's in every aspect of my life. It's from being a dad to being ecclesiastical leadership to being the coach, and then just kind of doing my own thing. But it really is about service. It's about spending my time helping my fellow man, pull themselves out of the muck. And, I found that that's my sole purpose is to serve. And so recovery today is 100% like giving of my time to those who need the extra help and to move into the arena of a coach instead of a therapist and counselor. It really was, I think, the golden label, to heck with all the other letters behind my name. The coach and that service I get to render on this team, it really does, get me up every day.
That's awesome. I love it because the whole erase and replace thing makes total sense to me, right? I'm always saying the best defense is a good offense.
Yeah.
If you're out there, if you're doing positive things, setting goals for yourselves, you're that much further from consciously obsessing over substance abuse or other kind of mental health struggles, if you will.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love that. Tell us a little bit about what do you got going on as far as I know in
Man.
September's recovery month, right?
Yeah, so we got a lot going on. The last year, I've been able to kind of just strengthen the team and do a little bit more robust kind of involvement. And we've got all kinds of stuff online now. We have online trainings for certified sober coaching, 40 hours of like intense training to become a certified coach. And people have been, going through this program and opening up chapters of Addict to Athlete all through the country, which is still kind of bizarre to me because it started just as a little idea to go running at lunchtime, and has now turned into kind of this movement. And so we got our online coaching program. We have our online meetings. We have about 12 meetings throughout the state and into Nevada now. And with our podcast and our YouTube channels and the content we do there, it really is become just a huge part of my life as well as my family's.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So tell us a little bit. Does your family get involved in a lot of this stuff? Like,
yeah.
You make it really.
So,
I had to.
can I interrupt that for a
You
second?
bet.
Because I got some. I'd like to start a little sooner. So you mentioned a bunch of things that are in your life that are that involve your recovery, and so for a sec, tell us who Blue is. First of all, let's talk about your family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me what your family looks like, and
Yeah.
how your interactions with your family have changed since getting clean, and that sort of thing. Start with family. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I've got I got 2 boys and 2 girls, so the force is completely balanced. The 2 girls are the oldest, Brooklyn and Savannah, and then my 2 boys, Boston and Camden, and they're a hoot. So all together, the Robinsons are quite a clan. Like meet the Robinsons. That's kind of our life. We're all kind of doing all these crazy things together. But they are very much involved. The kids all participate on the team through our minor league program, the 18-year and younger group. And I've been able to do a couple podcasts with my daughter, Savannah. She seems to be gravitating towards that counselor, kind of mindset, which is not good because she tells me where the bear poops every once in a while.
Did you tell me how old she is?
Savannah's 14.
Okay, so she's already heading.
So she thinks she's 25.
Towards helping the world.
She is, and she's going to solve some problems there. But yeah, like I said, I think we've created a monster in her because she's very wise for her age. Because her mom, my wife, Marissa, she's our athletic director. She's a recreational therapist in profession, and really is the backbone of this whole thing. I mean, it's her that kind of keeps us all glued together. It might have been my idea, but it was because of her influence. And so, together we do a lot of fun stuff. And I've always said that as soon as my kids say that it's too much, that's when Addict to Athlete's over and the baton gets passed, because I wanted them to always be an active part of it.
Sure. See if you can guess where I'm heading with this next question. Mm-hmm. I'm a Baltimore Orioles fan.
Oh boy.
Do you know where I'm headed with this?
I know the area, yeah.
So the Baltimore Orioles play in a stadium called
Camden
Yards.
Mm-hmm.
And yet your other son's named Boston. You cannot have the Baltimore Orioles baseball stadium and the Boston Red Sox in the same family, can
and
you?
you got the Boston, the Brooklyn Dodgers back then, right?
That's
all
right.
that stuff. Yeah, it's in Savannah, Georgia. I don't think they have.
Savannah, Georgia is a
Atlanta
pretty
Braves, I
place.
think, right there. Yeah. And that wasn't even by choice. I think the names there. My wife likes the kids' names are after rivers and bodies of water.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah,
There you
she's
go.
a swimmer.
I love that you said, that she's kind of the backbone of the thing. Behind every great man is a great woman.
And she's amazing. Yeah, she kept me on track, got me through school. So
absolutely,
she owes a lot to her.
Okay, so I'm going way off script here. You can take
You're
the
going
lead.
rogue.
You can take the lead if you want. But
I like the freestyling.
yeah,
So
I do too.
I love that you've talked about what your recovery today looks like. It's service, right? It's giving back to other people.
Isn't that recovery?
It is recovery.
That really is recovery right there, right?
Well, yeah.
Because and I'm also reflecting back on the motto, erase and replace. Right? There's too many people that erase, and then they're unsatisfied with recovery because it's not that great,
Exactly.
and they don't replace, they erase. So that's not recovery, right? That's sobriety,
Yeah.
and it's not that fun.
No.
Right? If that's all recovery is, I don't want any part of that. That's just boring.
Yeah.
Right? You got to have passion in recovery. I think that's the concept of the podcast. We're not going to steal your motto, erase and replace, but the concept
Go
of
right
the
ahead.
podcast is, now it's a great motto, and we might throw it out every once in a while. We won't steal it as ours, though. But I think if people don't replace, then they're bored with recovery but they're not in recovery.
Yeah.
Right? They're bored with sobriety is what they're really bored with. And sobriety's, if all it is sitting on your hands and not using drugs or alcohol, I don't want any part of that.
Yeah.
That's not fun.
Well, and that's where the principle behind the erase and replace with things of greater value, meaning more than just one, because you know that you can erase using, but replace that with maybe becoming a gym rat. And then you're in there too much. And that was one of our criticisms at first, is that people didn't understand. They thought that we would be, tempting our athletes to cross addict. And I'm like, oh, heavens no, because, we create balance through service and through engagement, through building family relationships. We call establishing a home team, much like you would on a dynasty, basketball team.
Love it.
And so we balance these athletes out through service and these speaking engagements and participation and all kinds of things to create that whole sense of things of greater value. So you can't just erase and replace. You got to replace that with more, so you don't get typecast into one thing.
Yeah. Great. That balance thing is awesome.
Oh, for sure.
I will sometimes lecture in some of the treatment centers where I'm a medical director, and we talk about, the final common pathway of addiction, where dopamine is released in the midbrain. And then I list all the things that release dopamine in the midbrain. One of those things that releases dopamine in the midbrain is exercise.
Yeah.
And if you live with no dopamine in your midbrain, your life is not very good, right?
No.
So you got to have some. The problem is, we also have to learn balance, because if all you do is stop drinking and drugging and then spend 24 hours a day in the gym, you're now addicted to that.
Absolutely.
Right? Because it's a process or an activity that releases dopamine in your midbrain. So as addicts in recovery, we all have to be careful to balance that stuff, because you haven't replaced if you've just changed.
If you just changed and switched, yes. Cross addictions are a very real thing, and because our teams are so localized, and we train the coaches to kind of watch over with stewardship, they keep their finger on the pulse to all their athletes, and so it's a lot different than a lot of the mainstream groups where community resources are, because we know what they're doing. Word spreads pretty quick when someone falls down a rank, and we have our personal trainers go out who are they serve kind of like what a sponsor would. They go out there and help them, get back on their feet and stuff. So, we have a lot of accountability, and if they get too much, too many egos going, we humble them down and get them into the service aspect, or start helping out with the minor league, and we get them doing more than just the one typecasted activity.
Beautiful, beautiful.
I've gone to an addict to athlete meeting, and I absolutely loved it. So I'm all about positive I am statements.
Yeah.
One thing, this is not a knock on NA or AA. Let me start off by saying
Absolutely.
that. However, because that's where I got my foundation.
We all support that.
Absolutely, 110%.
Right.
I think what you tell yourself is extremely powerful.
It's true.
When I go to NA and AA meetings, my home group, I say I'm an addict in recovery. Because I finished that I am statement with something positive, right? Something I'm feeding my brain.
Yeah.
I've been to an addict to athlete meeting. Tell us a little bit about how you introduce yourself, the meaning behind it. Let's get some of that.
Yeah, thank you for asking. It was one thing, and when we first started Addict to Athlete in 2011, there wasn't anything else like this here. And I say this often, that we are very lucky in the state of Utah to have so many programs that have come after Addict to Athlete and compete for people's attention. And I love it, because when we first started, we had to go through some lumps and some bumps, because I didn't feel like I wanted my athletes to describe themselves as that negative connotation. I knew that they had addictions and that they were addicts, but not anymore. That's what it's about. It's about moving from addict to athlete. And what we do is when they introduce themselves, and each chapter does it, kind of on their own merit, but they'll introduce themselves as champions. And any athlete that comes to a meeting in recovery, they calls himself a champion. Anything that follows an I am statement is absolute truth, and you're going to believe it. And so I think it's important to understand the principle of I am an addict, but for how long? Because even our Roman numeral 2, the reason why we chose a Roman numeral 2 and not the number 2 was because the Roman numeral system doesn't identify with 0. So you can never be less than 1. So whatever is left, whether it's your higher power, maybe it's you, maybe it's a loved one, and then you're never less, you're never 0 in the Roman numeral system. But once you add something to 1 and become 2, that's a platform to build on. That becomes a foundation. And so what we wanted to do is help teach them that you're more than an addict. You're also a father and a brother and a son and a scholar and an athlete and an artist, and all these other attributes, because anything that follows an I am is absolute truth. We've got to be careful with that.
Yeah. Hey, that's for sure.
Yep.
I love that. Tell us a little bit about the meetings themselves. There's like a topic, the discussion, your traditional support, and then you guys do something a little different.
Yeah.
Paint us a picture of that.
It was kind of funny. I wrote the Addict Athlete Playbook, and it's got for anyone that gets trained to do this, we give them the playbook, and there's like 65 topics that are kind of sports related, maybe athletically related to a principle of sobriety. And I think that the same principles that go into being a world class athlete, as you know, you've been in sports a lot. You use those same characteristics, principles, and motivation to become a world class person in recovery, sobriety. And so what we do is we have a topic, and it's an open discussion. And because of that, we have a lot of folks that come that don't have addictions. Like we were talking before we recorded, the muggles, we call them, the non-magic folk, right? And they come just because they have a loved one that does. And so we combine those two, and they learn from each other. And so the cool thing is no one knows who's using and who's not. I mean, who's an addict and who's not, because you're all on the same team. And so we go through, we have an open dialogue, we talk about the positive aspects of recovery, and then literally we work out, whether it's yoga, running, whatever they want to do, softball, they have an activity to get the dopamine levels going. And it's proven to be kind of a great motivator for folks, because everyone that comes on the team at first says, well, I'm not a runner. And it's like, well, yes, you are. You just forgot, because no one walked from house to house when you were trick-or-treating as a kid, right? So as you got older, it wasn't as fun. So we help teach them how to do it. And like you were saying, the dopamine release, what I realized real quick is that when you're running and you're exercising, it's left-right brain stimulation, which is what EMDR therapy is. So when I was getting trained in EMDR therapy, I'm like, I thought I was creating this new pathway of recovery and breaking new ground. I'm like, it's just EMDR. And I've seen some amazing things happen because of the follow-through these athletes are doing.
Awesome.
That's amazing. And there's some solid science behind what you're talking. I mean, everything that you just shared with us, there's some solid science behind that. The other thing too, you can be an athlete in many different ways. Yep. I mean, Dr. Sellers here is a golf. I mean, look at those.
Look at those shorts.
He's got the green hat going on with the green shorts. He's got his. Do you golf in those shoes, Dr. Sellers?
I'm going to today. Yes.
Yes. So, I'm trying to, super smart guy. How old are you, Dr. Sellers?
100.
He's 100 years old, right?
Years young.
Or 60 exactly.
He grew up with the Flintstones.
Right.
Fred was his best friend.
I had that big thing of barbecue ribs on the side of my car.
You just made me hungry.
That sounds good, doesn't it?
Really, the point I'm getting at is he can go out on a golf course and get that same dopamine rush, right? He can go out on that golf course, erase and replace.
Yeah, because that's what, golf, it's about patience, it's about focus, it's about technique, and so many aspects of what you do to connect with that ball goes into recovery. The same things about being focused, about blocking everything else out, focusing on the moment, being mindful, and so we take all those principles and put them into recovery.
Yeah, that's great.
So whether I'm an 18-year-old kid and I want to get out and run a marathon, or whether I'm 6-year-old Dr. Sellers and everybody in between, there's something for you. Yeah. I got to tell you, Coach Blue, I've been holding some resentments against you, because I went to an addict athlete meeting a week or two ago. It was an awesome meeting. You were on, right? We took some questions and stuff, had a good time with the meeting. And then afterwards we went and played sand volleyball. And I think my lower back is still spasming from, does that mean I'm getting old?
Yeah.
Dr. Sellers?
That means you're older than me. Yeah.
So my lower back's still spasming. It was such a good time, though, just getting out there. And, nobody's trying to be super technical or put pressure on anybody. It was just a group of like-minded individuals having fun, right?
Well, that's the beauty of it. And when I have the athletes participate in city recreation, and I've gotten some flack for this too, is I don't have them participate in the sober softball leagues or the sober leagues, because I want them to stop typecasting themselves into that one paradigm. I want them to feel like they can go out and wear the addict athlete jersey and start conversation. And it's backfired a few times. We've had teams come up and mock them, like, "Hey, you drug addicts," not knowing what we were. And for them to keep their composure, and then to kind of teach the principles after the game, and have those same athletes come back and apologize. I want them to know that they're not a special case, that they are normal. One of the biggest things for addict athlete was to lessen the stigma of what an addict and what addiction is. And almost 10 years later, I think we're starting to chip away at that.
No question.
Definitely.
Get rid of that stigma.
The last thing I wanted to touch on in your journey in recovery and addict athlete, before we break into part 2 here, is anonymity. So anonymity traditionally has been what you see here, what you hear here, keep it here.
Yeah.
You guys have here. You guys have a little bit of a different approach.
We do.
In the last 5 minutes, can you take us out of this part one?
Yeah. Again, thank you for asking, because these are the principles that I've really kind of wanted to kind of emulate and kind of strengthen in the person that's in recovery, because I understand the principles and the 12 steps, and I honor those. And a lot of people think that Addict Athlete's a competitor to that, and it's not. Never has been. But again, because it's new, people don't understand, so they guess, and they guess wrong. But the concept of anonymity in 2020 is deadly. And I get the principles of Dr. Bob and Bill when they were going through that and establishing that, because a handshake was as good as a contract. And when your word was your bond, if you had a problem and it got out, it could mean, game over for you. So I understand the principle of it. And I think that level of integrity is amazing. On Team Addict Athlete, we do things differently. It was the very first time we had the first 5 athletes that ran the very first 5K. And before they started, they handed out these shirts that said Addict Athlete. And as a therapist working at Utah County, I'm like, you guys, you can't wear those. People are going to know. And they're like, we don't care. I'm like, all right, well, if you're okay with it. And because of that, the mayor of Provo identified them as they ran by, and he had a conversation with the athletes. And, John Curtis, who was the mayor of Provo at the time, really sparked the fire for Team Addict Athlete to go, because he went to the county commissioners and said, hey, there's this team, it's a county program. I saw these shirts. And so really their anonymity now becomes their lifeline. It's people will wear these shirts, and the inquisitive folks will say, hey, what does your shirt mean? And then they get to bear testimony of their sobriety and their journey. And because, there's a lot of muggles on the team, the non-using folks, and they wear them, they get to say, well, my husband, was an addict, or my son, passed away because of addiction. And so it really has given them the green light to talk about their recovery.
That's beautiful, because it becomes a message of hope.
Yeah.
It becomes a symbol of overcoming a difficulty.
No more shame. Mm-hmm.
And there's so much shame that gets included in just that stigma.
Yeah.
Go
For
ahead.
those of us that have been sober for any period of time, that stigma and that shame starts to go away, right? And I think that's really critical too. So anonymity to me means it's not my job to reveal your addiction or sobriety.
Great point.
But I don't have anybody in my life that doesn't know that I was an addict at some point, and I'm not ashamed of that.
No.
I've been clean for a long time. I learned a lot of stuff from addiction that I wasn't going to learn any other way.
Exactly.
And so if you take that and turn it into a positive, then why would you be ashamed of that? Because I am not ashamed of the fact that I haven't touched an opiate in 18 years. Like, I'm really proud of that fact.
Yeah.
I'm not ashamed of that at all. And I hope the whole world knows that. Like that, first of all, it's an accomplishment. And second of all, I got some stuff out of my addiction that was helpful for the rest of my life, that I learned about myself. Humility being one of those. And I've talked about that. I'm not a very humble person, but addiction taught me some humility, I'll tell you that. And I don't want to bury that.
Oh, for sure.
I want everybody to know that.
My paradigm shift changed when I had a conversation with a bishop, and I'm in the pity pool. Why me? I thought God was merciful. I thought he was loving, and just super swimming deep in the pity pool. And he said something to me that completely blew my mind in paradigm shift. Mm-hmm. He said, Jared, what if you get to the other side and the Creator says to you, your higher power, fill in the blank, that's amazing you were able to overcome that challenge. How many people did you bring with you, though?
Exactly.
Addict to athlete, Dr. Sellers sharing his story, that brings people together, right? It becomes a message of hope for people to say, hey, you know what? I might not be strong enough right now, but I can look at Addict to Athlete. I can look at Dr. Sellers.
Yeah.
And I can pull hope, and I can pull motivation from that to be able to push myself to get to that point.
Yeah, well, our bookend, erase and replace. Starting the end of every meeting, we say, turn your mess into a message. That's the 2 taglines, and that's what it's all about. Turning the mess of addiction to the message of sobriety.
So powerful.
Beautiful, beautiful. I remember in the midst of when I was at my worst and I'd lost my license to practice medicine, I didn't have a decent source of income. My wife posted on our mirror at home a little thing that said something, and I'm paraphrasing now because it's actually not still there, but I'm glad God loves me enough to keep giving me trials.
Brilliant.
And that's the different viewpoint on it, right? Not this why me, but God still loves me.
I love it. You guys have been listening to episode 003 of We Do Recover. We've got in the house Coach Blue. He's sharing his vision of addict to athlete with us. Coming up, we're going to have a part 2. This is part 1 series. We have part 2 coming up. We're going to take a call, have Dr. Sellers address that. We have that hotline number. It's 801-410-0676. Got a caller that's called in. I'm excited to get to part 2, guys.
Don't forget our sponsor, Steps Recovery Center.
Absolutely. Steps, where addiction ends and healing begins.
You are listening to We Do Recover with Jared Miller and co-hosted by Dr. Terry Sellers. We'll be right back after the short break with more of We Do Recover with Jared Miller, brought to you by Steps Recovery Center. We welcome you back to We Do Recover with Jared Miller, co-hosted by Dr. Terry Sellers, brought to you by Steps Recovery Center. And now with part 2 of our podcast, Jared Miller and Dr. Terry Sellers.
Welcome to part 2 of We Do Recover. We have...
All right.
All right. You can just can't let it go from part 1, huh?
Right.
You like it.
I did. It was just so Matthew McConaughey-like. I liked it. All right.
We've got Coach Blue here. We're getting his journey in recovery. He also is the founder of Addict to Athlete. You're listening to his journey in recovery. This is brought to you by Steps Recovery Centers, where addiction ends and healing begins. They also have, did you know Steps has a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week hotline you can call if you need like help getting into some treatment?
Well, I didn't know that, but I like it.
Well, yeah. So that number is going to be 801-800-8142. So if you or a loved one needs some help, you're ready to submit your will and your life over to God as you understand him, go ahead and reach out to them. That number again is 801-800-8142, brought to you by Steps Recovery Centers. Okay, let's get after it. Part 2, you guys ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do it.
Sean, are you awake over there, big guy?
Everything's super. I'm sorry. I'm still planning my Sturgis trip.
Oh, my goodness.
Apparently distracted a little bit by Sturgis.
Google Maps on his phone, checking the best path.
He's talking about Sturgis in Utah, everybody. He definitely is COVID compliant, right?
Yeah, Sturgis, Utah. It's next to
Loa.
Yes.
Bicknell.
Yeah. That's where we're going for the afternoon and then coming back with nothing else happening. Just that.
To Maverick.
To Maverick.
like
Adventure begins. Hey, Maverick, let's get a sponsorship.
Yeah, hey, where adventure begins.
Okay, so let's
Move on.
We have a hotline. We got some callers.
What's that hotline number?
It's 801-410-0676.
Call us with questions.
Call us with questions, comments. If you know of somebody that you're like, this podcast fits this person perfectly. They've got an awesome, they're a mover and a shaker. Definitely reach out.
We'd love suggestions for guests. That would be awesome.
Yeah. Are you ready to take this call, Terry?
I
With
am.
Dr. Sellers?
I sure am. Terry's fine. Listen, I was born with a name. It wasn't Doctor.
You've earned it, though, and it's a sign of respect, right?
Whatever. It's fine.
Okay, let's hear from this caller.
Hey guys, it's John Gossett. I just was calling in with a question for Dr. Sellers. Dr. Sellers, I was wondering if you live with somebody in your home that you suspect is overusing prescription drugs. I'm just curious. I understand that there was some legislation to make naloxone available without a prescription, and I'm wondering if you could tell a little bit about that. And if that information is true, where can I get some from my home? So, hey, appreciate you guys, appreciate all you're doing, and look forward to your answer. Take care. Bye.
Awesome. That's a great question,
Hey guys,
John. That's a great question, John. Thanks for asking. Let me give you a couple of thoughts on that. First of all, I think that is, if you have an addict living in your home, naloxone is a must in your home. Keep that addict alive until they can figure out how to get clean and sober themselves. And so, sometimes there's a lot of controversy around what is called harm reduction. Harm reduction is where maybe the person who's struggling with addiction is not ready for complete change yet. And basically, harm reduction is keeping them alive until they can get ready to change, maybe. And so that's what sort of naloxone is. And sometimes it's got a bad rap. Harm reduction has a bad rap. The goal of harm reduction is to keep people alive, and I don't know how that can be a bad rap. But that's what you want to do with your loved ones, is keep them alive. So if you have a loved one, and listen, naloxone only works for opiates. So we're talking about opiate addicts. And opiates are all basically derivatives of opium, or synthetically derived opium. So they're all the painkillers. So typical opiates that we run across are going to be on the street. People are using heroin because of its cheap cost. And then we hear a lot recently about fentanyl, which is now cut in with several different drugs, super potent opiate. And then all of the strong pain pills, so Vicodin and Percocet and Oxys and Roxys and all of these things. These are opiates, right? They bind to receptors in the brain, and one of the things it does is to decrease your drive to breathe on a subconscious level. And so people die from opiate overdoses because their heart stops and their breathing stops. Well, their breathing stops first, and then their heart stops because of that. Naloxone blocks that in the brain, blocks the ability of opiates to bind to the receptors. Therefore, they can't exert their effect. Okay, so, and it's strong enough of a binding that it actually will kick the opiates off the receptor. So if you give somebody who has now overdosed and is either not breathing or barely breathing, you give them a shot of naloxone, it'll kick all the opiates off of the opiate receptors in the brain, and they will start breathing again. You've saved their life. Okay. Utah does have legislation that made naloxone, it's not quite what we would call over-the-counter, but you do not need a prescription for it anymore. You don't have to go visit a doctor and beg. There's no shame left in that process.
Love that.
You can go to most pharmacies. Now, not every pharmacy is participating, and I can't name you all the specific ones that are, but you can go to most pharmacies and say, can I get a naloxone? It's usually an injection. Sometimes it comes in a nose spray, but either way it works. They'll give you one. It's not free necessarily, but they'll give you one without a prescription. So go call around and find pharmacies that'll give that to you. You can also look up a couple of things online. Utah Naloxone will give free doses of naloxone. There's a couple of other organizations that will give out free naloxone as well. Just a mandatory thing. If you have an addict in your house who is continuing to use and who is not ready for complete change yet, please go get that and save somebody's life.
Or hey, listen, maybe it's somebody that has some serious medical issues. I have a little brother. Shout out to my little brother Jordan. He has some serious medical issues where he has to take powerful pain medication.
Yeah.
And we had the conversation with his wife, like, hey, you might want to keep some of this on hand because accidental overdoses happen all the time.
Sure. And it's not always the person taking the meds either.
Oh,
what if a
great
kid
point.
gets into those bottles? If you don't have naloxone laying around your house, not laying around, but you know what I mean. If
Safe
you don't
place.
have naloxone in your house and a kid accidentally gets into that bottle of pills, you could lose a kid, or you could save his life with naloxone.
My life was saved with naloxone. I got hit with it on the bathroom floor after an attempt, right, at my ground zero, my rock bottom.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love it. I love that Utah legislature. Thank God that they passed that.
Yeah. I'm glad somebody hit you with naloxone. I'm glad you're here.
Appreciate that.
Serious.
Me too.
But I think that was a great thing that you pointed out. This doesn't have to be for only people who are addicted to opiates. If you have powerful opiates in your home, you might want to have naloxone. Well, you do want to have naloxone in your home in case the person taking them accidentally takes too many, or in case somebody else gets into those things.
Amen, brother. So, Coach Blue,
Yeah.
you're You're not one of those magical folks, are you? You're not a normie. Don't tell me you're a normie.
Oh, heavens no.
It's magical.
Yeah. No.
Well, in certain ways. What did you call them?
Muggles.
Muggles.
He's not
Yeah.
a muggle,
I'm
I'm
stealing
not a muggle.
that.
which means
I'm
he's
not a
magical.
muggle. Mhm. Yep.
Okay, so you've told us about your life
Mm-hmm.
in your journey in recovery. It's a beautiful one. Not only have you been able to stay on top of your game, not only have you been able to erase, you've been able to replace.
Yeah.
And man, you've built an empire.
And then you elevate other
Thank you.
people's game. I love that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Addict to athlete. Yeah, you're definitely somebody. Tell us about your struggles. I want to get into.
Take us back
Blue.
to the beginning.
So
Yeah.
we've talked. Part one in this was awesome. That was Coach Blue. Let's get
Yeah.
into Blue Robinson.
Gotcha.
Where did this thing start for you?
Yeah, born in 1975 in Grand Forks, North Dakota, to husband number 4 for my mom on the military base. And so because of my mom was married when she was 14 years old. So she was a kid herself, had 3 kids, and then lo and behold, here comes Blue. My biological father was a raging alcoholic, heavy duty user. And in the middle of the night, in a cold winter evening, if you can imagine, North Dakota, Grand Forks, North Dakota, because of some abuse and the addiction, my mom scooped us all up and drove us all back here to Utah. So I didn't really get to know my biological dad. But we were, because of my mom being pretty much a child, we were in and out of homes. We moved 28 times before I was 18. Wow. And, she was married 6 times, married and divorced 6 times, just a lot of abusive stepdads, carry scars on my body from like abusive stepdads. And so realistically and quintessentially, I was determined to fall into a life of addiction. It was following my mother. It was following every husband that she married and every relationship she got involved with. And my siblings started going down that path. My older brother, my sister, my next sister, and then, of course, there's me.
And I just got to throw a book reference out there real quick. Mm-hmm. I love it. It just reminded me of this book. It's an amazing book, Childhood Disrupted. Mm-hmm. Everything you're talking about right now, I mean, it's a blueprint of. So thank you. Continue.
Yeah. Well, and so it was really kind of a chaotic lifestyle. We were always on government support and social social help for food and for vouchers and things, and hand me down clothing, which when you're getting your brother's clothes from the 70s and you're going to school in the 80s, it didn't quite match.
Not building your self-esteem.
No, and really because we would move into these places and not even unpack boxes because we were moving out, and so it was a rough childhood. My mom married a guy. His name was Larry Robinson, and he was an amazing guy. But he came at the end of me even needing a biological father, so to speak. And so I grew up kind of really mistrusting men. And so really I took the last name of Robinson just because I think he was trying to get a leg up on trying to build that relationship with me. And thank heavens he did, but it was a little bit too late. And so I'd already started to drink, and I started to do those gateway things like the marijuana and the drinking and those kind of things. And
at what age?
I was I was age 13 when I first tried my first drop of alcohol. Yeah, and then just stayed out of it until the thick of things about age 16 when just it all broke loose. And so THC, alcohol, methamphetamine, and LSD. And so those were just things that were commonplace. And a lot of times I would just sneak it from my parents. And so really, as I started noticing my friendships starting to decay, 16, 17, 18 years old, and, lifestyles and patterns of lying and everything that an addict would do. I mean, I was a really good manipulator and liar because I watched all my siblings and my mom. Like I think she invented that, like the mistruth and lying and stuff.
She did for you.
She did because I believed it all. And so I dropped out of school and, and they were fine with it. I'm like, I'm not going to school anymore. And they were like, totally like, all right. And so really it was a downhill slide. And then I had a really bad experience on February 2nd of 1996. And it was bad. It was a rock bottom. It was a scary situation where me and a friend just pushed things a little too far and life got real fragile there for a second. And it scared me enough to push away. And by the grace of God, I did. I pushed away, and I committed what I like to call social suicide. I walked away from all the friends and the family, which was not easy, because it was so scary, and the things that I got myself involved with, of like, jeopardizing my life, that I turned a corner. And so really by committing that social suicide and walking away, I was alone. And so I like to joke that my friends were Monica and Chandler and Ross on Friends. That's all I had. And I slowly started to kind of climb out of this fog, and it was bad. It was a really sad situation. And I started doing things like work. And it was funny when you work and you get this thing called a paycheck. I started accumulating all this money, but I wasn't using anymore. And so I had this big wad of cash. And so
what were you doing for work? Sorry.
Well, it's kind of funny you'd ask. I was working as a courier for a youth treatment center in Provo, Utah. Cool. It was I was drive kids to and from, troubled teenagers to and from court dates and doctor's visits and stuff. And the one qualifier was, did you have a high school diploma? And of course, I checked yes. Because they get a master liar here.
Oh, yeah.
No one checked. And so, but what was cool about that is, as I was starting to get purpose by helping these kids out, and just driving them to and from, that's how I was introduced to the 12-step community. I would take them to the 12-step meetings. And I would just sit and listen, and no one knew I had a problem. But as I sit there and listen, I'm like, this is kind of crazy. All these people are coming together talking about this stuff. It's weird. And so, I talked to the kids about it as we're going back and forth. And one of the guys, his name was Steve Allred, pulled me aside one day and said, "Blue, you're really good at connecting with these kids. Have you ever thought about going to school to become a counselor?" And I hadn't even finished high school yet.
Path changer.
Yeah. So I met my wife at that school at Heritage. She was a recreational therapist. I was a courier. We bumped into each other. And so, long story short, I conned her into hanging out with me a little longer. But I went to school, got my adult high school diploma. I was the first person in my family to ever graduate high school. None of my family's ever graduated high school, let alone college.
Congratulations.
And so my wife kind of pushed me in that direction, and got my it was an LSAC back then. I was a second class at the University of Utah for the SUDC class, the Division of Substance Abuse up there.
Awesome.
And so I started working there, and then I went on and got my master's degree, which was nuts. You're looking at the first guy to ever graduate UVU without taking math. It's a whole nother hour that we don't have. And basically it was just like not taking no for an answer. And so really, my recovery started when I pushed away, and been clean since February 6th to 1996.
Wow.
Yeah, that's amazing. You
That's
just gave us so
great.
much right there. And you
That's
transitioned
awesome.
so that our listeners can connect with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm with you. Sometimes I feel like I've talked about the dark things, and this podcast isn't about,
Darkness.
the war stories or the
It's
drug
about-
journaling.
It's about light.
If you were to say your DOC, when you talked about on the February 2nd, I forget the year, I apologize, but
96.
1996.
1996.
Wow.
So, without getting too much into that, stuff, what is it you struggled with, so that if the listeners are listening, they can go, I can connect with this
Yeah.
Blue Robinson.
For me, it was whatever I could get from my parents. And so it was the pills, and it was the easy, accessible stuff. It was the alcohol. And, the same things. It's checking the medicine cabinets and all that stuff. And so really it was more alcohol based because it was available, and it was depression. I was self-soothing depression. And so, anything to kind of numb, the fact that my life was bad, trying to wrap your head around, being an abused child and all that stuff. And so, anything that could kind of numb that pain was I was all over it.
Sure.
Absolutely. And I think that's powerful too, because listen, if I'm a parent listening in, I know for a fact, if either one of my precious children, if I can prevent them from going down the path that I've had to walk, please make that possible, right?
Hard to
I'm
do.
saying a prayer right now.
Hard to
Lord,
do.
if you can hear me.
Yeah.
But so, I mean, even if a parent is in the depths of their addiction, save the next generation.
Yeah.
Listen to Coach Blue's story, and don't make it accessible to them, right? Because nobody's happy when they're in, right. Like
No.
you're not having a good time when you're really
No.
right before rock bottom and you're in the depths of your addiction.
I couldn't imagine
Save
doing
your
that to my
child.
kids. I just couldn't imagine it. And so that's one of the things that I was terrified to have kids. Terrified because dads mean pain. They mean hurt.
Right.
And so I remember when my first daughter was born, Brooklyn, I carried her around for the first couple of days on a pillow. And my wife's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I don't want to hurt her." And she's like, they're kind of rubbery. You'll be okay. And I'm like, "No, the dads hurt kids." And so really that mindset of one day having to explain to them as we're hiking up a water slide, "Hey, Dad, why do you have these scars on your back?" And then me having to explain to those kids, well, your dad had a couple of guys that were dads in his life that were not so nice. And seeing their concern in their little eyes, I'm thinking, I've never put them through that. So really, it kind of gave me that reinforcement to be the opposite of what I was taught. And so I like to say that I'm a pretty good dad because I do the opposite of what I was taught.
Yeah,
awesome.
Listen, you can learn something from everybody, right?
Yeah.
You can learn how to do things right, or you can learn how to not do things. And,
and we all have excuses to
way
use,
to
and I just
be-
don't use it that way.
way to be that change that's
Thank you.
going to change it for generations to come in your line, right? Really quickly for me, I got two questions, really, but
Well, I have a question for you. So
okay, great. You were talking about, and I heard the part of your story. You were taking kids from, what was that, Heritage?
Yeah.
To meetings, and then you kind of just like started listening. And was there a moment
Yeah.
that happened that's like, I got to stop doing what I'm doing?
Yeah, I already started, kind of that sobriety path, but really when I started understanding that I wasn't alone, that there were these people that were talking about it,
Okay.
and listening to people talk about their strategies and the fellowships and stuff. That's why it's kind of funny when people think that athletes competing with 12 steps, because guys, that's I volunteered to take those kids every day.
Right.
I lost myself, I did 120 and 120. I was every day taking these kids, so I'm a believer in them. But it was just listening to the stories about I'm not alone. Other people struggle with this.
Okay,
Strength in
so
numbers.
my second question, we're running a little short on time, so I don't need to take too much time, but was it, you're in recovery now, okay? So your life's changing, things are getting better, you're decent, maybe you're married. How did addict to athletes start? Like what just the
Inspired
very
you.
beginning, where was that?
So it was when I had all this money and I went out and bought this mountain bike because I had all this money and I didn't want to use it for drugs. So I took it and I just gave this guy in Provo, a bike shop, this big wad of cash and said, what can I buy for this? And he gave me this really sweet Trek mountain bike. And it was wall art for a little while, but then I took it out one day and I bumped into some folks that were up there biking, and I was in the wrong place. Levi shorts, no helmet, no water. And they're like, dude, are you lost? And I'm like, in more ways than one. And so really it started there and kind of becoming, I'm no longer an addict. I'm a mountain biker. And then meeting my wife and her family, they're all recreation based. They're all swimmers and they're runners. And so I started running with my father-in-law, who lives down here in St. George. And I started having that father-son relationship with my father-in-law, which was huge. I never had that before. And so really he got to know me through all these miles we're putting in to do the St. George Marathon. My very first experience with running was the St. George Marathon in 2000. And so it started with just me like wanting to do something different and bumping into some guys that didn't ask me if I could score weed or whatever. It was, hey, you're lost. Let's get you down off the mountain. And they said, hey, we're up here all the time. Get a helmet, get a water bottle, and meet us here on Thursday. And so that's kind of how it started. But really, it was me being able to see it worked for me to erase it and replace it. And so when I was presented with the opportunity at the county to take 5 guys to start, that's what we did. And now it's turned into this big thing.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that.
That is great.
And I got to give a shout out. You mentioned the St. George Marathon. Do you have any idea who started that?
I should, but I don't.
A guy named Sherman Miller. It's my uncle.
You know that guy.
Uncle Sherm?
Uncle
Wow.
Sherman Miller. He started.
He puts on a good show.
Yeah. Did you know when he first started that thing, he had to go around and beg people, right?
I'll bet.
And now it's huge.
Yeah, no, it's hard to get into.
He passed away a year ago. Shout out to him. Love that guy. So, Dr. Sellers, if I'm listening to this, Coach Blue just shared his experience of it was around, it was available. My question is, with Big Pharma is huge today. If I'm a concerned parent and I'm listening, there's a lot of ADHD going on. There's a lot of, at what point, or if I'm a parent, how do I have a doctor visit where I keep my kids safe so they're not early exposed? Because I look back on my experience started through pain pills, right? And it took off. If I'm being a proactive parent and keeping my kid safe, what's the best way to do that?
That's a really, really good question. First is be involved in their lives. Listen, there comes a time in kids' lives where they don't want to hang out with their dad, right?
I've noticed.
There's an age where their parents stop really having much influence on them. I'm not saying you have to do too much in the way of influence, although that stuff comes earlier in life. You influence them earlier in life, but be involved in their lives. Know what they're doing. Know where they are without being too snoopy and too overbearing. And listen, kids want their independence as they get older and start to feel more confident, and they should have that. They deserve some of that, right? We all need that. But stay involved. Don't just let your kids do whatever they want to do and you don't know anything about it. Stay involved, know what's happening, know where they are. Monitor the kinds of people they hang out with. I mean, that's important.
I tell my athletes to parent out of inconvenience. It's not convenient to be a parent. And so you're going to miss the jazz game. You're going to miss some of the things you want to do because, like Dr. Sellers said, you got to be there with them. You got to see them when it's not convenient.
Both great answers. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, listeners.
I'm excited. This was a great story, wasn't it? This
Coach
is a
Blue,
guy.
You almost made me
Crushed it.
cry, man. Oh,
No, this is a guy. Listen, you're doing some great stuff.
Thank
and
you.
I think you should be applauded for that. You have changed some people's lives. I know people that are in your organization that just love it. And I haven't gotten into it. I probably should one of these minutes.
And we are honored that you came on.
But I'm glad-
absolutely
yeah.
honored. Thank
Just
you.
happened to be down here when you needed me.
Super nice of you to come in because it was a great story. I hope our listeners really enjoyed that. I'll bet they did.
Absolutely. And listeners, you're listening to episode 003 of We Do Recover. Thank you.
Sponsored by?
Sponsored by Steps Recovery Centers, where addiction ends and healing begins. Like this, subscribe to this, follow, rate, review. Thank you for your support.
Thank you for joining us today on We Do Recover with Jared Miller.
Help us spread our message of hope. Like, comment, and share.
If you have any topics or ideas for future shows, please share that on our Facebook page.
That Facebook page is We Do Recover with Jared Miller. If you or a loved one needs help, please reach out to us. Again, thank you for listening. Brought to you by Steps Recovery Centers.
This has been a production from a podcast studio.